We've now come to the sharing portion of this meeting, so please help me give a warm welcome to our speaker, Deb W., who is speaking today on the topic of sponsor self-care, not getting stretched too thin, and how to make sure we don't neglect our own program. Thank you for coming today, Deb.
No problem. Well, I'm Deb W., and I am a sex and love addict. And I'm on the call from Cleveland, Ohio, where it is snowing a lot. And it's very pretty, and after the call I'll have to shovel. So anyway, I'm really glad to be here. My sobriety date is June 17th, 1991, although my first meeting was May the 6th, 1989. My bottom lines are no stalking behaviors. If I'm not in a relationship with someone that I trust, I need to be gone from that relationship. No sex outside a monogamous relationship. No sex in a way that I am uncomfortable or will break somebody else's boundaries. And no staying in a relationship with someone who is not in the same relationship with me. And today I've been invited to talk about sponsorship and self-care within sponsorship. And I have to tell you that I've been a sponsor for decades, actually, a couple of decades, and I've also been sponsored for over a couple of decades. And so I'm very happy to talk about this topic, and it was really great for me to jot down some notes as to the many ways that I've learned over the years in how to take care of myself within the context of a sponsor or sponsee relationship. And I think one of the things I'd first like to share is when I talk to any sponsee of mine, one of the things that I do is I quietly say the Serenity Prayer in my head. And that's just to get me grounded as far as being able to listen and not be judgmental and try to be helpful in ways that I can and to allow God into my conversation with my sponsee and hopefully to leave any motives that I have for pride or codependent behaviors or whatever at the door. I really hope that that's one of the things that happens for me when I say the Serenity Prayer, and it does work really well for me. One of the other ways that I take care of myself is that I have a sponsor myself. It's a little bit difficult for me, pretty much against my value system, to be a sponsor and not be sponsored. And I've undergone lots of different ways that I have been sponsored, because Cleveland is not an area where there are a lot of women in attendance at our meetings, and there are many heterosexual men who that's not an appropriate sponsor relationship for me at all, even after 20-something years. And so I have been sponsored a number of different ways, individually with women here that are local, with women that are 12-hour drive away through Skype and telephone and frequent visits through the years. I've had a long-distance sponsor, also through telephone, email, and Skype. I've had I've had times where I haven't had those three options, and I have had a group of men, small group that I call my three brothers here, that have sponsored me in the past, using all three of them as a group to be my collective sponsor, and that was really helpful at the time that I wasn't able to find a female sponsor for me. So, but that's a very important quality in taking care of myself, is to have a sponsor myself, because I really do believe that when I am talking to sponsees, the sponsees aren't really there for me to to use or to lean on in times of support and hardship. Those times are meant for my sponsor to talk about my difficulties in my recovery and my difficulties in working the step with my own sponsor, and I try to draw that as a boundary between a sponsee and and myself. One of the other ways that I practice self-care is for me to come to an understanding about what my role is as a sponsor, and to negotiate sometimes with my sponsee as to what that role may be viewed as from the sponsee's point of view. And quite honestly, I keep it really simple for myself because I don't want to complicate what could be a very simple and supportive relationship. So I see my role, or understand my role, as a support in my sponsee's program. They're not working my program, they're working their program. But my job, I guess, is also to share my experiences, strength, and hope with them, share some strategies that I have used and how to stay sober and work the steps, how I've connected with a higher power, how I am of service. And hopefully what will happen is that from this experience as a sponsee, they will become at some time a sponsor themselves, kind of following with the 5 S's in the preamble. I use that as a sort of a measuring point of just what my basic rules as a sponsor is. I don't have a lot of expectations in a sponsor-sponsee relationship. Like I said, I keep it simple. I have expectations that my sponsees connect with their higher power, whether it's through prayer, meditation, whatever it is that, whatever venue they have to connect with their higher power, go to meetings and be of service, of course, work the steps. I've had to negotiate relationships with sponsees who rely heavily only on me and conversations with me without doing some of the others, like the prayer and going to meetings and being of service. And that's one of the things that I negotiate with a sponsee, because I really can't be that end all and be all to one's link to their own recovery. I really do think that there has to be some action on a sponsee's part. My role is not to be a friend, although I have developed some friendships from sponsor-sponsee relationships. Quite honestly, I like to keep a boundary between me and another person when I'm sponsoring them, and that may sound kind of cool, but it works for me. And like I said, I do have friends that have been sponsees in the past, and they're very lovely relationships. But sometimes I have to say, okay, I'm going to put my sponsor hat on or my friend hat on, and sometimes it complicates things. But it's been a nice jumping off point to some friendships. My role is also not to be a judge or a parent or a boss or a therapist or a doormat. So I try to keep my role very clear as a sponsor, and I work in the field of counseling anyway. So this is a really important way that I take care of myself, is not to be one's therapist. So if I see that a sponsee is having difficulties with some issues, and it's impairing their ability to recover, often I will say, please seek a therapist, because I can't be that. My other part of a role is to be a good example to my sponsees, and the reason why that's a piece of self-care is I just feel good about not being a hypocrite and walking like I talk. It brings me some satisfaction, especially because I live with integrity. So when I look at myself in the mirror, I can say that I'm a good example to another recovering person for the day. And I briefly touched upon it, but I develop or maintain good boundaries. I have a really busy schedule, and in recent months it's become busier. And so it's really important for me to maintain my boundaries. And And I usually negotiate these with a sponsee at the very beginning of a relationship. The use of a phone. I'm one of those people that I have a home line and I have a cell phone. And I've been known to leave my cell phone in my purse in my car. I've also been known to leave my cell phone in a Chinese restaurant for 2 days. So it's not always, letting that person know, what's probably the best way to connect with me. The use of email and my availability, that has to be negotiated because there are times where I'm not available or can't be available. And so that's a really important part of taking good care of myself, is to get that boundary out right away so that either it can be negotiated and or maintained. And in saying that, I encourage the development of my sponsee's own support network, because as I said earlier, a sponsor shouldn't be any sole source of support to anyone. And that's part of my recovery program, is to build a support network for myself outside of my sponsor. And in times when my sponsor wasn't available, either they were out of town or they were, busy with their life, or they needed sleep, or whatever else was going on with them, that I had other people that I could reach out to, and that's been a gift to me as well. I do have one of the other boundaries I do have an expectation of respect in my relationships, and I've had some sponsor-sponsee relationships where that hasn't been true, and I've had to end that relationship, and I will talk briefly about that later. But I do expect a certain amount of respect, and I have worked through some really stressful issues, relationship issues, when two people come together and have a relationship, even a sponsor-sponsee relationship. There is a certain amount of emotions that have to get worked through. There's times where there's glitches in the relationship that need to be worked through and negotiated. And if I need to renegotiate some rules or boundaries or my role, I stay open to feedback, and I listen to what it is that a sponsee needs. And certainly if I can change to accommodate that need, I will. And so I leave myself open to that, but I also at the same time need to stick with my boundaries as far as availability and the kind of time that I can spend on any one phone call or doing emails or whatever the case may be. Another way that I take care of myself is that I maintain the balance that I've worked so hard for in my sobriety. It's important for me to be present in all aspects of my life, for my family, for my work. Besides SLAA service, I do other types of volunteer work, and so it's important for me to be present, and that's physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually for the other aspects of my life. So it's important for me to have a balance and to fit sponsorship within that framework. There was a time where I felt I got a lot of really good feelings primarily from sponsoring people, but what was lacking in my life was I was spending a lot more time with sponsees than I was with my own family or on my own work accomplishments, and I had to learn how to provide myself with some balance in those situations. Another way that I take care of myself is that I have a limit to how many sponsees I can have. I don't like to do things half-assed. Some of the recent changes, unfortunately, have probably changed some of the ways that I've had to sponsor recently. But in looking forward, one of the things that I do know is that I have to limit myself to how many sponsees, and not only just how many, but what kind of sponsees, how many newcomers I can handle, how many old-timers I can handle, what are the needs for my sponsees? Do they need a lot of time? Do they need a certain period of time in the day where they need to talk with me that I may not be available? So it's really important for me to look globally at the kind of sponsees that I have and whether I can accommodate their needs. And sometimes I have to say no. I can't. My schedule will not match with your schedule at all. And that, especially if I'm doing, long distance kinds of sponsors, which happens, and I'm in a different time zone than others, it can get pretty tricky. It's really important to me because I know when I'm overwhelmed or I put too much on my plate, it starts to interfere with my balance and even my serenity and perhaps even my sobriety at times. And so I've learned to just create balance and an overall picture of what my needs are and what the needs of my sponsees are. And I think the last big area that I practice is I practice my own self-care. If I need to get back to therapy, I do. If I need to get some rest, I do. If I need to get some good food because I'm hungry, I do that. If I need a hug, I get that too. If I need to get some exercise or I just need some time to be quiet and to meditate, part of what I need to do is to set some time aside for me to do those things as well. And I guess I wanted to talk just briefly about, I don't know what you guys call it, but we call it firing people. Let's fire your sponsors. And I've been fired before as a sponsor. And part of my self-care has to work through the end of that relationship. And I used to take it so hard. I used to be, I have a tendency to be perfectionistic and want people to like me. And so, having a sponsee say, I don't want you as my sponsor anymore was always really tough. But over the years, I've learned that sponsees have lots and lots of different reasons for leaving the relationships. They grow up, they have different needs, they want somebody closer, they want somebody that's different, they want somebody that's, heterosexual, they want somebody that's, a woman, whatever. I mean, there's different reasons. It's not all about, say, my personality, but certainly in closing that relationship, I do have to take a critical look at myself as to if I had done anything to hurt that person or chase them away. I have to take responsibility for that because that's just how I like to work my program. But in general, I don't take it personally much anymore. And there are times where I have to fire somebody else. I have to let go of them. Like I said, especially if they're not respectful of my boundaries. And there was a time where I sponsored someone who I discovered was performing a sexual act as she talked with me, and that was for me immediate grounds to be, to let this person go, but not without, some recommendations about what to do from that point forward. I also have let people go when they have broken my boundaries. Time and time again, I usually have a 3-strike you're out rule on the inside of me unless it's been really, really terrible. And sometimes I let people go because they're just not doing the basics. Again, I feel very uncomfortable when I'm the only sole support to someone and they're not working hard for their recovery. They're basically using just one person as as their sole source of support and not integrating other aspects of SLAA or the program into their lives. And I think those are the big ways that I take care of myself. And I guess the other way that I'm taking care of myself today is to share those things that I've learned over the years with you, and I appreciate that you have been listening. And I'll close with that.
Thank you so much, Deb. I'm going to go turn the recorder off now. I'll be right back.